Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I am joined by my friends and colleagues Alexandra and Whitney to break down all of the major astrological transits for the month of June. There are a lot of transits coming up in June. We have Jupiter changing signs into Cancer. We have a Jupiter square to Saturn and Neptune. We're getting really close to Uranus entering Gemini, which will happen in early July. So a lot of major outer planetary changes still coming this year. We'll be exploring, obviously, a few of those for this month. There's also a lot of just normal, natural, but very dynamic planetary transits happening in this month of June. So we will break it all down for you today in just a moment here. Before we get into it, as always, please remember to like and subscribe. I hope that people consider Nightlight to be a place for the daily spiritual practice of astrology. That's really what I envision this channel to be. If you are not yet subscribed, it helps us a lot to grow when you click the subscribe button. You can find transcripts also of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And before we get into the astrology of June, I want to point out a few things happening. In June, if you go to the events page on nightlightastrology.com, click on in-person events, you'll see the summer solstice gathering that's happening on June 21st from 6 to 8:30 p.m. at the Grapevine Collective in Minneapolis. Just RSVP to join, so that way we know how much stuff to bring. It's free to join, though. And then events, go to speaker series. We have our summer speaker series coming up. It is free to attend. You just have to register to receive the link for the webinar. You get the recording if you can't make it live. We have a talk on June 7th, 8th, and 15th from Gemini Brett, Marjorie Cottrell, and Krista Hamilton. These are all wonderful talks that are coming up at Nightlight. You can check them out there and register. All of these free events, by the way, are facilitated through your support of the Kickstarter every year. And then finally, we have our June webinar, which you can go to under live talks, which is Uranus and Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius on June 19th. The talk is titled When New Objects Appear in the Sky. I think that this is a really, really fascinating outer planetary transit. It is somewhat rare to see these two planets configured in this way. It does not happen all that often. And in air signs like this, it really does reflect major changes happening in the realm of technology, science, even things like aliens. I think all on the table for this talk. Really going to be fun. So register for that if you can't attend live. You get the recording as well afterward. The last thing to promote for the day is our first year program. Of course, year 2 and horary also begin in June, but we recommend you start with year 1 to get started. This is our first year class in ancient Hellenistic astrology. It begins on June 22nd. After I sign off today, there's an informational video that's about 12 minutes long that tells you everything that the program includes, how it works, take you over to the course website, show you where everything is housed, give you a real feel for it. That orientation will serve as the best place to get your questions answered, but you can also find most answers to the questions on this page. At the bottom, you'll also find enrollment options. Enroll now. The class starts now, but we can get you set up just as soon as you're registered. And you can check out the need-based tuition option if you need a little help to make it happen. So if you're someone who'd love to take this class, but you're working within a really tight or restricted budget, we understand. So we do have a sliding scale that's there for people who might be experiencing hardship or just a little tightness around the finances. We know that everyone is really experiencing a different financial reality. And we don't want people to be priced out of studying something sacred. So for that reason, please check that out. Take advantage of it if it works for you. All right, on that note, I'm very excited to have Alexandra and Whitney back to break down the astrology of June. Hey.
Hello.
All right.
Hey, friends.
The band is back together.
Boom, boom.
So what are you guys most, do you feel like mostly excited about June just purely because of Jupiter's entrance into Cancer? Or do you feel like it's going to be dicier? Like what are your general thoughts about the month?
No, I feel really excited about it. I've had a few friends and clients and people who kind of come in going, Jupiter square with the fallen Saturn. And I'm like, not concerned. I'm not concerned. Jupiter is so strong, and the astrology of this month has such a possibility for optimism and like self-agency, I feel. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I am right there with you. I feel like after the whirlwind we've been through year to date, 2025, I think that Jupiter into Cancer is just going to feel like a breath of fresh air. And it really is like June is this month. You'll hear, obviously, as we talk through it, it is this story of Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune and how they're interacting and how we're like bringing this newness forth into our lives. So I'm looking at this like a start to a fun summer. Let's do it.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like I just did obviously a webinar on Jupiter into Cancer. So shameless plug, go check that out if you want like I think my most focused, deepest research that I presented in that talk. But one thing that I was really encouraged by was how much healing there is when Jupiter is in Cancer, with where in places where there has been division. So the Jupiter exaltation status is built off from understanding its dichotomy with Mars in Capricorn. Mars is in its fall in Cancer, where Jupiter is exalted. Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn, where Mars is exalted. There is a very natural way in which the sign of Cancer's, the hurts that are somehow Cancerian are often, they're very vulnerable places that we feel the hurt in the sign of Cancer. And you can almost think about that as the archetypal presence of Mars, where Cancer wants to build attachment, build security, build safety and connection. Mars severs, Mars cuts. There's a natural way in which that Marsiness is opposite Cancer archetypally. You just think about the sign of Capricorn and Saturn too. Jupiter comes into Cancer, and its natural tendency throughout history seems to be to mend things or heal things that have been severed or burned or hurt or divided. One of the things that I'll just share briefly was that almost all of there were many examples of Jupiter restoring things or healing things, or at least starting a process of healing where there had been division in terms of the history of racism in this country. Like Brown versus the Board of Education was Jupiter in Cancer. And there were many other examples like this, like Nelson Mandela, who is, a healer of apartheid, born with Jupiter in Cancer. So many good examples of Jupiter in Cancer acting as a healer, a restorer, a mender, and kind of like a healing all mother or something. I was doing that research, I was truly excited. I was like, okay, not everything is perfect when Jupiter's in Cancer, but there's some really promising significations here.
Like Taylor Swift healing the hearts of young women everywhere.
Yeah. Anytime you have like Empress energy, by the way, like big women as leaders, like that energy, just like rock star, matriarchal Empress kind of energy. There's a lot of Jupiter in Cancer women like that too. I thought that was pretty cool.
It was an excellent talk. I got a chance to watch it right after you recorded it, and I loved it. And it ended up being such a great preparation tool for our talk today. So yeah, for those who haven't checked it out, go check it out. And I've been talking about Jupiter and Cancer in the exact same way. I did a sort of year ahead podcast a couple months ago and talked about Jupiter as the salve to the wound that Mars in Cancer opened. And so I think we have a lot to look forward to in terms of that as well.
Yeah.
I love, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alexandra.
I was just going to say, I like that thinking about this as bringing up some of the stuff that you teach in your classes about the lunar and the solar and the difference in the ways that, for example, a lunar eclipse presents, or the ways that we can consider the difference between domicile rulership and exaltation rulership. So for me, this feels circumstantial. It feels like there is a layer of insulation, optimistic insulation in the circumstances and in the spaces between and the unseen spaces. Like we are all the ships are rising in the ocean with this transit, and that there will be more circumstantial support and sort of that lunar version of support coming for us, which is nice. As I have a night chart, and I've noticed that Jupiter transits for night charts aren't always quite so glowingly lucky, positive, optimistic. They're rarely bad or challenging. So I'm not saying that, but sometimes they just make things bigger or louder for night chart people and not always more incredible. So the idea that Jupiter will be exalted and have some of that circumstantial support is exciting too.
It'll be interesting to trace lunar cycles while Jupiter's in the moon sign.
Right.
I have a feeling that that's something that you would do, because I just what I've noticed of your astrological gifts over the past year, you're really good at paying attention to things like that. So I imagine you'll be tracking some of the moon cycles in relation to Jupiter. Am I right?
Yes. I mean, I have a Cancer moon, so I'll be personally interested in that. But definitely, even lunar eclipses and moon transits, it's very hard to track the moon. And people are always asking me, how do I get started with transit tracking? Should I just start tracking the moon? And I'm kind of like, no, definitely don't. Start with the outer planets or
Right.
something. The moon feels a little advanced, but I think that's something I'm definitely challenging myself to do this year is watching the moon transits every single day.
Mm-hmm. It's been nice. We have our Roots and Spheres program, which has definitely given me some grounded ways of tracking out lunation cycles. So I think that, in some ways, we've said this many times before, but in some ways, although we look and we say, what does the calendar month of June bring? It's all, in some ways, it's more effective eventually to be looking, if as you're tracking astrology, learn to do it on your own, to track lunar cycles rather than calendar months.
Ding, ding, ding.
The storylines are much clearer if you track it that way. And Roots and Spheres is so awesome because even if you don't track the moon, oh, the full moon's happening on this day and it's been 3 days since. So the moon's kind of around here. Like it's really, really helpful to have you guys as accountability partners in the moon tracking.
Well, and Saffron is so good at pairing gemstones
Yeah.
and Ashley with the plants. And it's like, yeah, it's just, and I've been so, I mean, like, I'm sort of very privately, like, I'm very reluctant and grouchy about, like, don't make me work with an herb or a gemstone. I'm like, I'm fine. I'll just have my meditation. I don't need all these bells and whistles. And now I'm like, I have a headache before bed. I'm going to put this crystal on my forehead.
Yeah.
Ashley comes in. She finds me with the crystal on my forehead. She starts cracking up. She's doubling over. She's like, I got you. I finally got, like they convert me. They've got me into using more. I mean, actually plants, I'm much more open to. I always have been. Like Ashley's just always dosing me with stuff based on what I'm complaining about. But gemstones, I've been like, I like looking at them, but I'm not someone, but no, I went to the Timberwolves game and they were supposed to close out the Golden State Warriors game 5 at home. I'd been to 10 Minnesota playoff games in my life, every single one a loss, every one. And I was convinced I was a little bit cursed and I was going to have all this anxiety going to the game. So I brought labradorite in my pocket.
Yes.
Had my hand on it the whole game, and they closed out the series. So I'm secretly now, I'm like, that's my superstitious rock.
Thank God you were there, Adam. Now you have to go to every single Western Conference final game.
No, I seriously, like, I have a very, like, through the Vikings, the Timberwolves, not so much the Twins and the Wild in Minnesota at this point for me, but those two teams in particular, I do divinations for before every game I watch, just for my own, like, growth and practice. I have to say, like, it is so much fun to incorporate divination into sports. If it's a hobby of yours, I highly recommend doing it, as long as you do it in a fun spirit, just for learning,
As long as you aren't gambling.
That's what I mean.
Don't incorporate it into that practice, I would say. But yeah, I think it is really, really fun.
I did tell you guys that I got contacted by someone in the gambling industry asking if I would be willing to do some consulting for them. And I just said, I can't do astrology with gambling, unfortunately. But then they offered me to do some sports writing just for entertainment. And so I started doing that. Some of it's going to be published, I guess, toward the end of the summer. So.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love to use it too when I read a headline before I click in and read the story. So like today, Brock Purdy signed this huge deal with the 49ers. So I just go pull up his natal and I pull up the transits. And we're recording with the Sun-Uranus conjunction, which is squaring his Mars in late Aquarius and opposing his Venus in late Scorpio. So I was like, that's interesting little T-square to be signing this very prominent and exciting contract. But then so I was like, there's something that's like some compromise, or maybe there's going to be some backlash about this. So then I click in and I read the article, and it's like, this was a major effort of compromise for him from the team, like where he really undercut himself because he just wanted to do what was right by the team. So I like to use it in that way too. It's
Yeah.
like just pre-anticipate what's going to happen inside the
Oh,
article when I click in.
love that. I love that. The divinations that I've done, I'm never fully certain about them because, I think diviners know that symbols can be very ambiguous at times. So I'm always very careful with certainty. But I think the Wolves are going to make it to the championship based on the divination I've been doing. I won't go into it, but I'm not 100% sure because, again, like some of the symbols, I'm like, you can kind of read it going either way. But I got the first two divinations with the I Ching for their first two series were spot on. So anyway, we are not talking about astrology at all anymore. So what we should
sports astrology.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Well, hey, whatever. Listen, guys, we have a ton of transits to get through for the month. Should we go ahead and dive in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We have a little bit of a miscommunication with the cataloging of our grabbed stories this month. So they will be back next month. We apologize. Last month, we didn't have time for them because of a childcare situation. This month, there's a miscommunication with the person that helps us archive them. So we'll get things figured out next month. Again, we've got good stories to share. We'll get you caught up on some of those. But here we are, June 1st. We're going to jump forward to the first section of the month. We've kind of segmented these in thematically. So this first section of the month is we're calling it closing statements. And I'm going to let Alexandra elaborate on that. And I'm going to take us forward to June 8th, which is the first day that we're really looking at this month here on the screen.
Yeah, kicking us off here. So this is the day that Mercury conjoins Jupiter at 29 degrees Gemini. And we are, as Adam mentioned, recording this for the month, the calendar month of June, but really this is kind of related to the beginning of the new moon cycle that happened at the end of May. So like on May 26th, we had the new moon in Gemini, and that new moon happened early in the sign of Gemini. So it wasn't necessarily near Jupiter, but obviously Jupiter is co-present there. So this really feels to me like the closing arguments of Jupiter and Gemini after this year-long transit. And I mentioned at the beginning, Jupiter for night charts is not always like insanely positive. Sometimes it's just louder or bigger. So for me, it's felt very chaotic. I have so many positive things to be grateful for, many lessons, okay, many blessings, but I am so ready for Jupiter to get out of Gemini. It has felt so incoherent. It has really felt like just a little bit of madness and mayhem and so many ideas, but not any way to follow through. So many awesome learning opportunities, but like not enough time in the day. So it's kind of felt like that influx of information that I imagine happens in like some crazy trial. This really feels like a moment where Mercury is adding dignity to Jupiter, so that helps a lot. And they are conjoining at the anaretic degree, which is kind of a dramatic closing statements moment. And so in that timeline from the new moon on May 26th, it's about 13 days or like half a moon cycle to get right here. And of course, just a couple days later, we're going to have that full moon in Sagittarius. This really just feels like the last little closing argument for Jupiter.
I love that. I think it makes so much sense. I see the drama in the courtroom with how you're telling the story, and I was picking up something very similar. I think because at the anaretic degree, it's almost as if we are feeling into what the next step is, because both of these planets together will move into Cancer in just a day, in just a couple days here. And in fact, I think Mercury is the next day. So, or actually today on the 8th, Mercury moves into Cancer after this exact conjunction. And so I'm thinking of like all the past year that Jupiter has been in Gemini, and Mercury has been trotting through the zodiac, gathering all of this information as he goes, comes back to meet with Jupiter. And it feels to me as if like in some sort of inspirational way, or like the closing arguments you're referring to. Like now we're ready to close the book and move forward, or we finally remembered like a key to the whole puzzle that puts us like on the next track. So it feels transitional at the same moment.
Yeah. You know, I think I mentioned this to you guys maybe last month, but I read a book in April called By Jove by Liz Green. And it's a text version of a seminar that she gave maybe back in like 2021 or something. But it's the first new book by Liz Green, so to speak, that I'd gotten to read for a long time, and I was super excited. And in the book, she talks about Jupiter in the way that Hellenistic astrologers do and ancient Vedic astrologers do. And so I was surprised by that because it'd been a while since I guess I'd heard Liz Green's take on Jupiter, but to hear that it's pretty much in alignment with a very old traditional view, given that she's a modern psychological astrologer, was to me actually really refreshing. And what she said that really confirmed this way of thinking about Jupiter for thousands of years is that Jupiter is related to the ongoing process of how we define and create a sense of meaning and purpose. And from a personal sense that my life has direction and purpose to the sense that the cosmos has a sense of direction and purpose. And the two are intimately connected because usually we feel the most faithful about the cosmos having some teleology built into it, the more that we feel that we have a purpose personally. And so she was talking about Jupiter in that way, and that one of the reasons that its transits are often more difficult than people imagine, like, oh, it's a Jupiter transit to my 10th house. Oh my God, I'm going to get a promotion. And then it ends up being maybe somewhat of a difficult year. And in the book, she went on to say, well, this is because the ongoing process of discovering meaning, purpose, direction, a sense of personal purpose and cosmic purpose is a challenging path. It's not always easy. There's work that has to be done around that. There's shadows that have to be faced and so forth. And Jupiter tends to bring the optimism when we bring the courage, you know? So that's really interesting. But anyway, all of that is just to say that Mercury, by its very nature, is opposite to Jupiter in that it serves this intimate role in the ongoing deconstruction of meaning and purpose, where we have to examine, do I really still believe this? Do I really still think this? Why do I think this? Or how? And that deconstructive part is actually a fundamental aspect of how coherence and meaning is built. But it has to be, we make meaning and then we deconstruct it in different circles and cycles throughout our life. So I think just speaking to like this culminating moment in Gemini, it's like, what have we unraveled? What have we explored, examined? Where has the skepticism or criticism been? Where have we been holding things up in the air with a big question mark? And there's something about that process that if we've been, I think, tending to it somehow, is reaching a culmination. Now, maybe with both of these planets moving into an exalted status rather than facing the tension between Mercury and Jupiter, we could see this as a moment that takes that deconstructive process and starts weaving it back into a feeling of understanding, order, coherence, which, you know, sometimes it feels like is sort of eluding us when Jupiter's in Gemini. That's
so brilliant. And you recommended that book, so I got it too. And I was so moved by the way that she, especially her selective retelling of myth at the beginning. Like I really, really loved the stories that she chose and the ways that she presented the faces of Jupiter there. And I think that's why it's especially potent to look at this transit in relation to that new moon in Gemini, because that moment feels like a plot twist in a movie where, oh my gosh, everyone was in on it all along, and you kind of wink at the camera and you break the fourth wall.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's like if you don't choose to be a part of that, you won't be. It's really simple, and that's coming back to what you're saying about this kind of crisis of belief or purpose is like, if you want this to be an inflection point for what you have been through, because to be honest, Jupiter hasn't had a great time in Gemini, especially with that Saturn square that played out over months. It just has felt really kind of stagnant and stuck and maybe not as empowered. If you want this to be a moment where you get to wink at the camera and you get to be like, oh, I was in on it all along, and I feel optimism and I feel excitement and I feel like that childlike wonder about what's next, I think it could be a powerful opportunity for that.
Yeah. Looking at the bound, I just thought I'd throw that in there. They're in Saturn's bound culminating. In the meantime, Saturn is in Jupiter's bound. So there is a kind of mutual reception between Jupiter and Saturn taking place. I think Saturn in Aries, let's just say at its worst, could have us really feeling like, oh, I'm not powerful, I'm not relevant, I'm not important, I'm not free, I'm not strong inside. There can be a lot of existential, weightiness that Saturn in Aries brings. But I think the Saturn in Aries challenge, as I've been exploring it in some recent episodes, is also like, I am relevant just because I exist. There's this way that Saturn in Aries can pare down meaning, purpose, faith, and optimism to something as simple as I deserve to experience those things because I exist. And just kind of refusing to budge on that basic fact. Anyway, the reason I'm saying that is because with Mercury and Jupiter culminating here, and you're in on it, but you have to make a choice. I think that's really apt, especially for this little bound exchange that they're having, where it's like, am I limited? Can I make a choice here to have learned something or seen something that is going to actually empower me? Even if, on some logical level, there you could be presented with a black or white choice, or even the feeling of being, like fixed. Like if I'm to remain open-minded in this situation, then I can't have a clear value distinction, or I can't have a clear choice. Like I feel like sometimes that happens to me where I want to remain open-minded, and I realize that there's nothing about making a hard choice that prevents me from continuing to be open-minded, even if I end up being wrong about something, or like sometimes you just have to make choices.
Right. It's like this tug, this push and pull, the tension that this growth requires. And I love that you brought the bound in, because now I'm seeing some themes repeating here, because in just 2 days we're going to have a full moon in Sagittarius, and we're not quite there yet, so I'll hold on that. But that full moon is also in Saturn's decan, and so we can look at that as the rulers of the full moon in Sagittarius, the Jupiter, which will be in Cancer, and the decan ruler, Saturn in Aries. They have this sort of mutual reception conversation going on. And so here we are continuing that. I had no idea that it started here in the last bound of Gemini. Very cool.
Yeah. Certainly gives a little bit of help also to Jupiter in the square to Saturn, with Saturn and Neptune both being in Jupiter's bound. Like, even though they're in the same position, like now Jupiter has a little bit of power because they're in Jupiter's bound. But anyway, so let's move on to the next section. Alexander has titled this section really nicely, Thresholds of Belief. And this sequence of transits goes from the 9th through the 11th of June. Why don't you take us through just kind of the major theme here that we're starting with?
Yeah, so this is really, to my eyes, about this build up kind of to the Jupiter Saturn square that happens after the full moon. But we have Mercury squaring Saturn on June 9th. And this is a little interesting because it's happening at the future site of that Saturn Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. So just something to think about there. We also have Venus in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius. And then on that same day, Jupiter entering Cancer. I'm going to walk us through it, but we'll talk about each of these transits individually. And then Mercury also squares Neptune on that day. It actually moves a couple degrees. And so all of that sets the stage for this very weighty full moon in Sagittarius with Jupiter in its newly exalted status. And it really feels like it ties into some of the themes that you were bringing up, Adam, about Jupiter and this crisis of belief, or this choice around belief and purpose and faith, really, that Jupiter often kind of brings up.
Yeah, the full moon at the end there in Sagittarius, in Jupiter's sign, newly entering Cancer. I mean, it is a really interesting little window. I love that you've called it thresholds of belief. Let's just run through those to repeat them. June 9th, Mercury will square Saturn. It's not like anything else is happening on June 9th. Venus will also square Pluto on the same day. Jupiter will enter its exaltation in Cancer, and then Mercury will hum along and square Neptune. Of course, Saturn and Neptune are traveling together, so you could just say Mercury squaring Saturn and Neptune, Venus is squaring Pluto, and Jupiter's entering Cancer. I said this in an Instagram post like a day or two ago. I said, like, we had Sun conjoin Uranus, and I forget what else was happening at the same time. Mercury was squaring Mars, and a ship hit the Brooklyn Bridge. Some inmates escaped. Joe Biden had cancer. It was like all this stuff was happening, and a lot of astrologers were posting, about it and pointing out the symbolism. And I pointed out a few just to illustrate the Hellenistic concepts. And then I said, astrology is all around us all the time, but there's nothing like the reminder we get when you have like 3 or 4 transits popping off on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Always the days in which you go, whoa, astrology is real. I love, this is so magical. Oh my God. And obviously some of those events might be really difficult too, but you get what I'm saying. So yeah, this period is going to pop off. This is probably one of the busiest periods of the month. There's a few others too, but like that's 4 things happening on one day.
It's astrology good. That's for sure.
So, but Alexandra, tell us more about what you see happening. Then Whitney, I want to hear from you too about any of these transits or all of them cumulatively. And you just tell me which one I can highlight if you want one in particular.
Yeah. Can you just advance the clock a little bit so that we have Jupiter into Cancer? Because that's all we are really excited to talk about, isn't it?
Yes.
No, I think it's interesting because we have, Mercury performing this opening square first to Saturn and Neptune, both on the same day. And that's happening again. It starts with Saturn at 0 Aries. So that's an important degree ping. That's some information that we're getting about what's going on at 0 Aries. And then we have Venus squaring Pluto, which is always a good time. It's actually always a good time for art. Like most of the incredible artists that I love have a Venus Pluto aspect in their chart like that. And then all of this is setting us up for this full moon on the 11th, where the moon is in Sagittarius. And that is so interesting because it means that the moon and Jupiter, of course, have mutual reception. Jupiter is in the moon sign and the moon is in Jupiter's sign. And so this to me feels like the shifting of different pieces of information and really a threshold where, if I'm calling back to what we talked about a little bit ago, we get to decide, are we going to move forward into a space of optimism? I feel like this year's astrology has been so talked up by so many astrologers, rightfully so. I am not disparaging anyone who, is talking about the astrology of this year. People have been talking about it for decades because so much is going on. I hear so much fear, though, from clients and friends and people who watch astrology media. And to me, there is a lot to be really optimistic about in the summer and fall, particularly of this year, on an individual natal level. So I really think that this is like one of those times where, as I mentioned, you get to decide what it really is that you believe in. Do you believe that there is optimism to be had in the world and that you have some personal agency and that you have, free will to make personal choices? Or maybe does that get a little bit pushed underground by that Venus Pluto and sort of subverted into a hidden pessimism or something that kind of goes underground?
Nice.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I also, like you, Alexandra, see the optimism here. It's a square, but as Adam, I learned this from you with when Saturn and Jupiter engage in a square, it is about, building a new structure for that newness to come through. I'm having a hard time finding the words because I'm inspired by it. Like the container that we make, the vessel for our gifts, our purpose, if we're talking about Jupiter here, to come through. And isn't it true that anything great we do requires some friction? Like, that's what a square is all about. Like, of course, as we're growing new things, we're going to experience some friction. Life isn't easy, and so I'm seeing that here in the full moon in Sagittarius, of course. But if we back up just to this June 9th day, with all of this explosiveness happening transit-wise, Mercury in Cancer squaring Saturn, and Neptune and Venus in Taurus squaring Pluto at the same time, I'm seeing this as, Mercury is the alchemist, right? It's like this spark of magic has moved into the space of the cauldron of Cancer, right? And we're with Mercury there, we're cooking up the perfect recipe. And so then with Venus in Taurus squaring Pluto at the same time, it's like, does that magic of the cauldron release something in us that prepares us for what this growth is about? And, that's about as concisely I can say what I'm seeing here with this movement.
Love it. That was really nice. I appreciate those thoughts. I'll see if I can add just a few things. I do feel like, going back to what we were talking about, the cumulative effects of Jupiter in Gemini, we're here in the midst of the culmination of a moon cycle that started in Gemini, that's culminating in a Jupiter-ruled sign of the full moon in Sagittarius on the 11th, and that will be ruled by the newly exalted Jupiter. I feel like a process of deconstruction is leading to the feeling that we're building something new. Because look, Jupiter Saturn squares, we've had a couple of them already, and they really are about the new things we build when the old things die. And usually we're talking about paradigms, but a paradigm could be very earthy, very practical, organizational, very tangible, or it could be more abstract, intellectual, theoretical. It could be relational and emotional. It really depends on where it shows up, in each chart. But this is really sort of the final moment for Jupiter and Saturn, their final square, as Jupiter is just crossing out of the sign of its natural opposite, right? So I just get the feeling that we're moving into the final phase of rebuilding something. It's ideological. It may be rooted in direction and purpose and belief. So I like this thresholds of belief title. But it's also, to me, it's like, I would not be surprised, and we're going to get into this when we go to the Jupiter square to Saturn, but I would not be surprised if this threshold of belief is being born in a really fertile place with Jupiter and Cancer through one last encounter with Saturn that is maybe the most difficult of all of them so far.
I think that Ruggiero calls the opening square the crisis of individuation. Is that right?
Yes.
Do we know that? Yeah. And that ties back into something you were saying about Saturn and Aries and like purpose and path and agency and reason for existing, which is such a theme for that Saturn and Aries.
The way I feel is like the Jupiter part is about to be settled. So this is only one way of thinking about it, but right, it's like the part about where I'm going, what I believe, what I sense the direction and purpose is, I could see being clarified during this moon cycle, and especially around the full moon. I think the Venus-Pluto dynamic could play a role in sort of tipping the scales, Jupiter entering Cancer, even the Mercury square to Saturn and Neptune. But when the squares start hitting to Saturn and Neptune, I feel like, okay, I know where I'd like to go, but as I'm moving into the gateway of this place of great manifestation and Jupiter's clarifying everything, it runs into the final boss. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what is that final challenge? What is the obstacle to overcome? Because sometimes it's like the path becomes clear, the vision becomes clear, which maybe it hasn't been easy to get at in Gemini. So it's becoming clear, and we're, oh, okay, wow, I really have a restored sense of passion or direction. But then immediately it hits a square from a fallen Saturn and a Neptune, and it's like a reality check of some kind that's coming about in the middle of the month. And I'm not looking at it like ominously or like something that can't be dealt with or overcome. In fact, I think it will be. But it is like, oh man, don't try to clip my wings right as I'm getting going here. That's kind of how I feel about it. But again, like you, I feel much more optimistic about the month overall than pessimistic. I think these are really good transits overall.
Totally. I'll share a personal story that I think you were speaking to without knowing. But I've been public talking about, my getting back into working out and figuring out how to do that as a mom. And it's been really fun and weird and hard. And working out is such a huge part of my life. I have Gemini, Sun, and Mercury in the sixth house. And it's just part of my life has been being an athlete and being active in this way. And I feel like I finally hit my stride. I was like so proud. I was feeling so good. The day Jupiter hit my son got a stomach bug. And so I was sick for a full week, could not move, could not leave the couch, could not
Oh my
eat. I
God.
was fasting. Like it was such a crisis of belief and it was unpleasant, but of course it wasn't earth shattering, but it completely clarified a lot of the unhealthy and healthy things that I was feeling and thinking about my health in that moment. And it's not really what I expected from a Jupiter Sun conjunction. I got to say, I expected good work vibes or something,
Yeah.
but it was really helpful.
Yeah. There's nothing like, well, I remember, for example, I came home from drinking ayahuasca and I felt like my path was clear. Wow, I'm on a spiritual path. And this is for life. And it awakened in me at such a deep level. There was so much joy and enthusiasm. Not that I knew what the future held, but I knew I was on a path. It was so deeply affirmed within me. I came back and almost immediately was dealing with the ongoing downward spiral that both my father and my grandfather were on with their mental and physical health. And it seemed to get more intense when I came back and suddenly was filled with this light. I was like,
Mhm.
and like, God bless, it all went, I think it went okay. Like the path was fine. It ended up being okay. Thank God my dad is relatively healthy today, have a better relationship now than I did back then, all of that good stuff. But like, it's funny how sometimes when you get the most confident, the most feeling of the wind beneath your wings, something comes up and it's like, are you going to stay happy? You're going to keep to that belief? And the answer has to be yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
100%. It's like when you are filled with light, the darkness is really obvious. It's such a juxtaposition. I think that's an experience a lot of us go through for sure. But here we are, June 15th, Jupiter squares Saturn and Neptune. Well, that's the 18th, but close enough.
And on the same day, I mean, what a day this is, because on the same day we have the Mars square to Uranus. So, and Mars squares to Uranus, like I was just saying, like it's not uncommon for that to come up and for there to be some need to react very strongly and quickly to an unfolding but somewhat unexpected set of circumstances with courage, decisiveness, but measured, non-reactive, crazy, responsiveness.
Oh, yeah. And listen, if we were under this Sagittarius full moon, if we were, because of that Jupiter Saturn square, kind of working through, a test of endurance or the weight it takes to build something great, like this is so much about, yes, we have our dreams. How do we make them a reality? It is creative. It is like making into matter. And if I'm looking ahead at the new moon in Cancer as this is kind of obvious, guys, but this rebirth moment, right? And so if we are looking ahead to the new moon in Cancer later this month as a rebirth, then these are like the labor contractions, right? Mm-hmm. And with Mars in Leo squaring Uranus in Taurus, it's loud. It's loud. But I also see this as, you know, as we're kind of forming these plans and working through the world, like what we want to accomplish may not come forth in the way that we exactly picture it now. And this could be a sort of reorienting, you know, Mars Uranus. It's like, you know, in an action movie and it's a car scene chase and the car is zooming down the road and then, you know, does this like U-turn. That's how I'm seeing this like Mars square Uranus of this like just like drastically turning the corner. But like on top of that, in a very, very practical way, I think what we could be looking at here is we now kind of know where we need to go. And we might have to like break some habits to get there, or like sever bonds that aren't working for us. And so I think in a really practical way, looking at this June 15th date, like this could be really powerful if you're, you know, trying to kick a bad habit or let go of certain things that aren't working for you. So it's powerful.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah,
Alexandra,
I think
you called this section a pressure cooker. I want you to say more about why you gave it that title, and then keep going because you were about to speak anyway.
For sure. Yeah, I really gave it that title because it's just full of squares.
Yeah,
full of squares.
Jupiter square to Saturn. We got Mars square to Uranus. We haven't even mentioned this yet, but then Jupiter will immediately square Neptune. Sun will then enter Cancer on June 22nd and square Saturn, and then the Sun will square Neptune as well, so entering back into where Mercury and Jupiter went over.
Yeah, and to me, you mentioned tracking the moon cycles with Jupiter and Cancer. Yes. And with Saturn and Aries, I'm paying extra attention to what Mars and the Sun are doing because the Sun is the exaltation ruler of Aries and Mars is the domicile ruler. And the relative happiness or strength of those two signatures says a lot about what we're going to be feeling from Saturn at any given time. So when this Saturn-Jupiter square comes up, it is a repeat. We had the Saturn-Jupiter squares in Gemini and Pisces before, but we had a relatively weak Jupiter and we had a somewhat strong Saturn. In this case, the tables are turned. We have Saturn in fall and we have Jupiter exalted. And when that square happens, we still have Mars and Leo in the Sun in Gemini. So it really feels like Saturn is weak. And even the day Mercury moves in and squares Saturn, same day moves through and it's like, that's all you had, and goes to square Neptune and move along, moves 2 degrees that day. So it really feels like this repeating motif. But now, as Whitney was saying, I do feel there's more of this tension around the instincts and motives we have for initiating change. So Jupiter in Cancer may have this more creative, fluid, emotive instinct that's instigating action, and it's kind of circumstantially exalted and supported in that way. Saturn in Aries fallen at its worst, you mentioned, Adam, unempowered, sort of disenfranchised even, especially because the Sun and Mars are so strong. So that Saturn is just really weak, like out there in the desert with no water. And it's a little bit of a crisis of purpose, as we've been talking about. So I do think Jupiter has a little bit of the upper hand here. And it kind of was reminding me, I feel like that Jupiter is really yearning, future facing, optimistic. Those are things we all just textbook associations with Jupiter. But it was kind of reminding me of this concept of anamoia, which is nostalgia for a place you've never known or like never been.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where Jupiter is, at this edge, just being like, no, I'm looking to the future. Like there's something really cool. I'm like yearning this Cancerian future nostalgia. There is something unexpectedly grounding us in the here and now with like that Saturn and with the Mars square to, what else is going on? Mars square to Uranus, but that would happen a little sooner. Yeah. So, but I do think this is like kind of a little bit of like a crisis around initiation and motive there.
There is a word that's used in Sanskrit to describe the sixth house, which is associated with Mars in the ancient tradition, that called sixth house called the joy of Mars. And I believe the word in Sanskrit is upachaya. I could be wrong. I'm sure I just messed that up. But anyway, the meaning behind the word is something like it's a house, the sixth, where it delivers blessings and benefits to the extent that you build the muscle of perseverance. So if you work hard through adversity, if you labor through hardship and toil and difficult circumstances, but you kind of keep pressing on, not to the extent that you're harming yourself, obviously, but like you're resilient, that it delivers good karma. And that's a nuance to the sixth house that I think probably needs to be talked about a little bit more from that perspective. I'm using that only to say that, isn't it interesting that, like you said, these planets squaring Saturn will be in the bound of Mars, right? Saturn's in the domicile of Mars. So you're right. Mars has a lot of power. What I like about this is that at the outset of these interactions, you get the square from Mars to Uranus while Mars is in its own bound and Uranus is in the bound of Mars. To me, that suggests breakthroughs are possible if effort, perseverance, courage, a kind of measured amount of willpower are applied. That, if you want to think about Saturn in the superior position over Jupiter that's doing a lot better, but Saturn is in Jupiter's bound, here's what I would say. Like, let's use a sports analogy since we started off with that earlier. Let's say that a superior team is lacking one of their key role players. That places all the pressure, even more burden on their star player or players to rise up and carry the lack of that presence. That's really important. So I'm using that, not prophetically during the NBA finals or anything, but the point would be, wouldn't that be great, since it'll be Anthony Edwards' Jupiter return, by the way? But yeah,
day chart or night chart matters there.
I don't have his birth. Well, I don't think they have his birth time. So
yeah,
I don't know. But what's so fascinating to me is like that Saturn could be saying, I have a weakness. I have a burden. I have something I can't do, something I'm ineffective at, something I'm failing or struggling with. I'm going to place that burden on exalted Jupiter to deliver. Jupiter, in turn, follow this logic, is in the bound of Mars saying, well, I can help because I'm exalted. I have a lot of power, but I do have to answer to Mars. Mars says in the square to Uranus, I'll help you out, but you're going to have to demonstrate a breakthrough with respect to willpower, perseverance, endurance, resilience to meet this moment and the difficulty it's presenting.
Totally. Brilliant. Mic drop. Coming through loud and clear.
Love it, right? Yeah. I feel like that's a cool. So it is a pressure cooker, but maybe it will reward us to the extent that we're like, hey, I got this. I can do this. Courage, confidence.
I think it clearly rewards us because all those planets slide into Cancer, and then we get into that Jupiter cazimi on the next day after the sun squares. And again, we have the sun quickly moving from square to Saturn, square to Neptune. I think it's really fascinating. I'm not totally sure what to make of it, and I'll spend some time thinking about it. But that Saturn and Neptune are both deeper into Aries than they are when they conjoin next year because of their retrogrades. So all of these messages are almost like putting the cart before the horse early in Aries, where they haven't even kind of learned their little lesson there yet or made their testimony.
Yeah. I love that's a really nice little nuance. Before we go on to the final kind of section of the month, Whitney, do you want to add anything into this section that's coming to mind at all?
I think we really talked about it. The only thing, is with the sun squaring Saturn and Neptune here at the end, like this is how we're bringing in the summer solstice, right? 6:20, the sun moves into Cancer and begins to make these squares. And the only little bow I want to wrap this up with is that, like, this is giving life to these newfound creations, right? It's like the breath, it's like blowing up a balloon, the breath that creates. And then how beautiful is it? Because then if we transition into the next section, then we have a Jupiter cazimi, which continues to speak to that in, like the power of belief and belief in that growth. So
yeah,
love it.
The last section of the month, Alexandra has creatively titled Jupiter Resplendent, and no doubt it begins with Jupiter's cazimi. This is a cazimi, by the way, that as soon as the sun enters the sign of Cancer, Jupiter is protected from combustion by virtue of being in its exaltation. I love this Jupiter cazimi, probably most because it's happening on my Mercury at 3 degrees Cancer. So I'm really excited that I might be putting the finishing touches on my book around this time, because it looks like that is about the timeline that I'm on at the moment. That would be super exciting. But aside from that, I digress here. I love this cazimi though, because it feels like almost like Jupiter enters with a lot to give, but then it's having its cup filled, as though it isn't already overflowing, if that makes any sense. It's like getting even more resourced to continue on in Cancer.
Like the cup is just getting bigger, and then it's like, okay, I'll just get bigger.
Yeah.
Jupiter vibe.
Totally. Follows right on the heel, like right on the heels of this, of course, is you can see the new moon forming right there. Let me just speed it up so you can see that we essentially have that cazimi taking place at the time of a new moon. I mean, you could say that the next new moon cycle is a Jupiter cazimi moon cycle, so to speak, because of how closely it comes off from the conjunction to Jupiter.
And isn't that so beautiful? Isn't this the best news that we all wanted to hear? It's like, yes, a Jupiter cazimi moon cycle. Let's do it, because right? It's like we're filled with this like faith in ourselves and a faith in something greater, and we're recognizing, we're beginning to recognize or like feel what the rewards we might be reaping look like. It's like a new life and a new dawn. And we're just reveling in the light of it. This feels so buoyant to me. And that new moon, I mean, let's just double down on the good vibes, because in the first decan of Cancer, we're working with Venus. So it's like a party of benefics, and it just feels like heart-swelling poetry and romance, and like have a date night, but like use protection because it's pretty fertile. And I'm just all gassed up on this one.
Well, if the NBA Finals were to reach a Game 7, I believe it takes place on the 23rd of June, which would basically be under the Sun-Jupiter cazimi. What's interesting is that we know at this point that any of the 4 remaining teams are going to bring home a championship to a city that has not experienced one in a very long time. Whether it would be Indiana, New York, Oklahoma City, or Minnesota, those aren't franchises with familiar faces, like a LeBron or a Steph, or even the Celtics from like this. I really feel like whatever city gets to bring home the championship, it's likely you're seeing a parade with Jupiter conjoining Jupiter, or Sun conjoining Jupiter in Cancer. Some city's going to feel pretty good about that.
I love that idea that someone is being coronated as a new solar figure during this cazimi. It's like we have the new future solar person coming up.
Here's my little theory. This is just pure speculation, and I will be honest, it is completely biased and flavored by total fan delusion. But Anthony Edwards was born with the Sun conjoined Mercury cazimi within minutes in Leo. I looked at this, and he's got Venus and Jupiter conjoined in early Cancer. And I was like, oh, wow, this could be the coronation of a young superstar. that's of course, like I'm projecting my fantasy that they win it all, and I can't see clearly. So
You see, that's why it really is divination is so hard and looking at the symbols is so hard because it could be that for him, but that actually is not predicated upon them winning. So it's hard to say
exactly,
because
exactly,
he could have some incredible moment where he acts with integrity or something in
right.
a loss
Or
that
he puts
people
on a great
react to.
performance, a memorable performance in a loss or something.
Right.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
We
it's
got to
hard.
look at the team and corporation chart. So we
Yes.
got to do that
Oh,
offline.
definitely. This is so much fun. I love it. Okay. Anyway, what else do we think about this, you guys? Before we were going to hit Mercury's trine to Saturn, Mercury's opposition to Pluto at the very end of the month, but let's say a little bit more about this cycle. What else makes you excited about it?
I think this is really a moment in throughout the year where we look at the quality of the light. This is like the triumph of the light, the summer solstice. And this it feels like resplendence, as I so titled, but it's not super loud. It's really devotional. It's very like ancestral. It has this quietness to it too, or like this symbolism anyway. And I love that Mercury is kind of carrying that into Leo, where it comes through in this like fire of articulation because Mercury moves into this external piece of Leo. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but you were talking about Anthony's chart, and then now I'm like, okay, I should. But there's this old Robert Schmidt lecture. Probably you recommended it to me for Kepler College about liking girding,
Oh yeah.
and he talks about how some medieval astrologers really referred to the sun and the moon as a group of luminaries as sort of being like and girding, as sort of sharing, not exactly sharing rulership, but having a special relationship to each other's signs. So thinking a little bit about the sun coming through and that new moon and just how the sun really feels like it has dignity in Cancer, especially here with Jupiter there. And so I've been thinking a little bit about that too.
Oh, yeah. Love that.
Beautiful.
You know, there was a tradition, and I'm going to mess this up. If I had Chat GPT, I'm sure Chat GPT would know exactly, but it was like, like that is like a very handy tool for just doing a little like research on it. Like, was it this year or was it that year? That's how I use it right now. But anyway, I believe it was in a Joseph Campbell text where he talked about the return of Jupiter to the sign of Cancer every 12 years for some ancient civilization where they would, the king would immolate himself. That means set yourself on fire, doesn't it? I think
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It sure does.
Yeah. That's what I thought. And then they would a coronation of a new king would take place. And I understand this as probably having to do with the fact that this is the summer solstice marker, a sign that marks the summer solstice. And so the replacement of the king would happen under these cycles. And I'm 90% sure that I've got that right from a Joseph Campbell text on some ancient civilization. But regardless, the theme of the sun conjoining Jupiter during Cancer season while Jupiter's in Cancer makes sense in terms of the replacement, the death and rebirth of a king. Both the sun and Jupiter have traditionally represented figures of central authority, whether it's a CEO, an empress, a queen, or a king. So I wouldn't be surprised to see major transitions in leadership with respect to this as well. Like, is there a woman becoming the boss of a company, getting a promotion to a higher position in a prominent place that we all see on television or whatever? Is there by the way, the historical periods of Jupiter in Cancer have also been clearly associated with major developments for women's rights, reproductive rights, all sorts of stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the changing of some kind of laws around these things, or with the sun eclipsing Jupiter here, or with the implementation of women in leadership, something like that, or even the death or transition of elder generations of women in the direction of younger generations of women.
Especially because we have Venus conjoining Uranus just a week after this on the 4th in
right.
Taurus.
And the 4th of
29 Taurus, in fact.
Oh
on the 4th of July.
And what is what we're going to have, Uranus entering Gemini right after that, right? Or right around the same time.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this could even, I mean, following those themes too, and generally tied to the female archetype as well. Like, what about public health and things that are happening in the sphere of public health in the US right now? I think we're onto something here. But it's really funny because I was doing some reading today in my favorite book, 36 Secrets. Yeah. Okay. So something you both said triggered something in my head as we were talking about the summer solstice, right? Which in the pagan wheel of the year is Lisa. And so what T. Susan Chang is, I'll just quote her really quickly as we're talking about possible leadership transition here, that this time of the year, the Oak King has reached the pinnacle of his reign, but his nemesis, the Holly King, is born today and shall ascend to his own pinnacle at Yule. And I think it just really illustrates exactly what we've been talking about here with sort of how this like new birth, new vision, transition of leadership is represented in this solar time of the year as well.
So brilliant, because this winter, like thinking about Saturn as kind of the Holly King, like we have so much Saturn stuff going on this winter. It's beautiful and crazy. There's this crazy pile up in Capricorn in January, and then in February we start eclipses in Aquarius. So that's a pretty interesting little quote. Thanks for sharing that.
It was just sitting open on my desk, like it was waiting for us, and I didn't know it.
I think it's also worth mentioning that as the Cazimi comes through and those planets in early Cancer are moving through the bound of Mars, that Mars will be in a nice little sextile with them from Mercury's domicile. And so we have like a nice witnessing of those planets in Cancer with Mars as soon as it enters Virgo. I like that just because there's when you find a harmonization with planets, you know, with one of the malefics, if they're hitting another one, in this case, Saturn's ruled by that Mars, and that Mars is harmonizing with the Cancer planets. It's kind of funny because often you'll think of Saturn as being problematic in terms of like actively oppressing you. It could be more like Saturn needs help. I really like the way that Alexandra, that you framed that earlier.
Yeah, my friend Sarah Posh and I are doing a Saturn and Aries webinar, so I've just been like jigging through the muck of this. It's on June 2nd if anyone wants to come check that out. But I really think that this, like a weak Saturn, but the language is sort of confusing to people because I think people say fallen Saturn and they imagine like that means Saturn is like evil, like fallen, like Lucifer. I think it really means Saturn is struggling. Like if you don't have good boundaries, if you don't have a strong Saturn signature, if your relationship to personal transformation isn't strong, then I don't know. I think you're going to have some trouble. That's why I'm thinking a lot about Mars and the Sun, and how if your Saturn is weak, like you might be able to strengthen those two to help empower Saturn, or maybe, you know, there are other antithetical ways, antipathy, and I could go on about that, but I'll spare you.
Nice. I think let's close with the 27th and 29th. These little transits at the end of the month are interesting. We are looking at Mercury transits, and Mercury will be having moved into the sign of Leo, is going to make the trines to Saturn and Neptune. I feel like trines are good. Like that's a nice flowy little connection to Saturn and Neptune, very fiery. But we do have the opposition to Pluto to talk about. I feel like, you know, this is a little bit like a reiteration of the Mars-Pluto opposition. I don't think it's probably as heavy hitting and confrontational feeling, but there could be some need to reconvene to talk about what was discussed during the Mars-Pluto opposition. That Mars-Pluto opposition, of course, took place in late April.
So Alexandra said something that really sparked my ears when we were talking about the new moon in Cancer and looking at Mercury here on its way into Leo. And she said, you said, the fire of articulation. And is that not such a beautiful image for what this is creating? Because when I look at this and see Mercury trining Saturn, Neptune, they're just in an opposition to Pluto. Oh, meanwhile, the moon is there kind of guiding and weaving things together. This feels like how we are finding an authentic voice in all of this, and maybe being able to even be boldly authentic. And I am, maybe with my rose-colored glasses on, not as worried about this Mercury opposition to Pluto as I was with Mars, because we had a lot of history there with Mars. And so I guess I'm seeing this as an opportunity. You know, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, it speaks of like re-strategizing, being deeply strategic, having deep conversations with your partners, with each other, or maybe even like out of that strategy, out of those conversations, having these like self-realizations that come forth in the wake of our new moon.
That's beautiful, Whitney. I think to your point, this is a little bit foreshadowing, and it to me really speaks to, sometimes I'm like, why are Jupiter and Mercury so different? And it's like, in this 1 month of us talking, Mercury has moved through what it's going to take Jupiter like 16 months to move into trine with Saturn. So Mercury's already kind of ahead of the game here, but I am thinking of this a little bit more in terms of foreshadowing, because we're going to start getting these Sun Pluto oppositions over the next 18 years. I think this is like pretty big culturally, societally, speaking to some big tensions around the type of people that we elevate, the types of people that we lionize and idolize, and whether or not that is good for us and whether or not that serves us and the institution of it all, the institution of celebrity. So I'm thinking like it's foreshadowing a little bit there for me, but in terms of its relation to this Cancer stuff, it does feel like Mercury moving out and striking out ahead. And it's just this, it becomes external, because what was happening in Cancer felt so deeply internal and intuitive. And now this is more of an expression rather than an impression for me.
Nice. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, like, okay, we've got the Mercury Saturn dynamic. If I'm just looking at kind of like those two trining one another, again, I know it's not that I always play with the bounds like this, but I'm just doing it because it's on the screen and I can't help myself. The Mercury Saturn dynamic, both planets in that trine are in the bound of Jupiter. And so we've got the Sun and Jupiter, Mercury's host and bound lord, together in Cancer, speaking to this kind of solar rebirthing moment for Jupiter that's quite strong, that seems to be playing a bit of a role in the connection between Mercury and Saturn. Like, well, what would that mean? Right. And it instantly makes me feel like Saturn is getting, like, if I go back to that idea that Saturn is weak and needs help, that Mercury may actually be capable of providing some resources here. When a planet is in the superior position, as it is here for Saturn being in the superior position to Mercury, one of the ways that it's talked about is being kind of demanding. It impresses its need, its position on the other planet more dominantly. So if Saturn's jacked up looking for some help, just like we saw Saturn needing help from Jupiter and the Sun, or Mercury in Cancer, you could say Jupiter's needing help from Mercury, and Mercury is going to be able to give some help, and it would do so in a way that's connected to the planets that host it. So you kind of follow that. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, but you follow that. You go, okay, so Mercury's resourcing Saturn. I wonder why Pluto doesn't like that. if Mercury's going right into an opposition with Pluto, then why doesn't Pluto like how Saturn is getting resourced, or what makes Pluto uncomfortable with maybe the empowerment that's taking place between Mercury and Saturn, or even in a weird roundabout way, the rebirth of Jupiter and the Sun? We know that Pluto in Aquarius is kind of like a king killer. It's empower the people, kill the monarch kind of vibe. It's the Revolutionary War and all of that. So could there be some moment of developing, let's call it a personal and psychological, developing sense of personal power, relevance, pride, a little bit of a enhanced self-esteem, getting a little bit better? And then initially someone doesn't like that. They want to take you down a notch, right? So is there a confrontation that has to do with self-worth? And like, I'm not going to be pushed around just because you don't like my shine, especially at a moment where I'm starting to feel resourced. Okay, that'd be one way of looking. Another way of looking at it would be if someone's getting a little inflated, there could be like a check on the ego. It's just like a healthy check. So I think of Pluto in Aquarius as providing a pretty healthy check for any arrogance that's real solar in nature. But at the opposite, on the opposite hand, it's Pluto sometimes loves conformity. In Aquarius, loves conformity to the detriment of individuality. So could that tension be at play somehow?
Yeah, Pluto is sextiling Saturn at this point too. And so I think I'm going to choose to think of Pluto as being jealous.
Yeah.
I think
jealous Mercury supporting Saturn. It's like, no, this is my job, dude.
Like, I want those resources. I'm retrograde. I need that.
Yeah.
And just 2 weeks later, Uranus moves into it'll be like a minor trine with Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto across those air signs. And that's when kind of Mars comes in through to Libra to make it complete. So there is a feeling of question of resources and support, and how we're organizing that support across the collective, which is exactly what you described through Pluto and Aquarius.
In both cases of Mars opposing Pluto in my own life, I dealt behind the scenes with fanatical, not well, very imbalanced detractors. That's something that maybe I don't like to, air dirty laundry or talk about the drama of trolls and detractors on YouTube, because it's not a very pleasant subject. And I also don't like to just sit around and complain about stuff. It's a privilege to have these kinds of problems, to get to have a podcast that I love doing. But it was really interesting to me on a symbolic level to watch, there's people who say shitty things, and then there's people who are really not well and say things that go way beyond what's cool. And maybe they do it to other people sometimes, but during these Mars Pluto dynamics, Pluto being pretty close to my midheaven, they were very, very personal and aggressive strings of many emails, just beyond what is ever cool. I was really surprised by that. And I was surprised by, when you can see someone is not well, they're not in a balanced place, they're not being rational, that you think, well, that couldn't hurt me then, because it's so clearly off base. But no, it's still hard to deal with. And I think that using that as just a little story to illustrate Mercury opposite Pluto, it's like, even if someone is attacking you or insulting you or putting up some barrier obstacle to what you're trying to do, and it's just completely off base, and even if you manage to get around it, there's still an inner space that can feel really kind of hurt from that. And I think that's something to think about during this period of time, is who are the people and what are the things around you that can be really nurturing and supportive. Like when I went through those periods, I thankfully have people in my life, my friends, my therapist, my wife, who are like, don't listen to that. Even if you didn't listen to that, that must have really hurt, oh yeah, it did. Well, have you taken a minute to actually feel that hurt? Are you rationalizing it because you ought not to feel hurt by someone being irrational? Mm-hmm. No, I haven't taken time to feel hurt by that. And then I did, and then I felt better. Stuff like that, where it's like we can't let our pride get in the way of being really human and taking care of ourselves in tense moments.
That's really beautiful. I'm sorry that happened to you, though.
It's part of the job. My wife listens to a podcaster. I'm going to take the charts and stuff down now since we've kind of finished out. my wife listens to a podcaster who's like a French woman who does fashion stuff, and she likes her advice on pairing clothing and color and all that stuff. She like stopped her YouTube channel for a while because she was dealing with anxiety and depression because of the daily insane trolls that show up she has a YouTube channel. It's a lot bigger than mine, but it is true that as the channel has grown, so too have the number, because it's just a bigger audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of people that will unflinchingly just hurl mud at you is also a part of that growth. And she talked about it really openly in a period of time where she just shut down her YouTube channel because she needed a break, because she was dealing. And I'm really lucky because I have someone that works for me who, if there's insulting comments, they just take them down to other people or to me or whatever. So I don't have to see a lot of it anymore. But there were years where I was the only one deleting them. And man, it's like getting hit by strays every day, you know, when people are rude like that. And you try your best to get through it by just focusing on the vast amount of people who appreciate the work and are really thankful, you know, thank you for today's video, all that kind of stuff. And that's really what brings you through, is that there's a lot more good than bad. But yeah, it's funny how I really think of those things as like tests of Mercury, like the Mars and Leo opposite Pluto brought up a lot of that stuff.
That's totally what I mean when I am thinking about Pluto in Aquarius and how that opposes the Leo piece. But there's almost like an inverse of it too. It's not just tension against like these sort of like Leo solar figures. It's at some point it's got to be the collective looking at itself in the mirror and saying like, is this really what we want to live in? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd hope so.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that was a personal digression, but I think like the other thing that I believe truly, speaking of healing and hurts and having opportunities to take care of ourselves, I really do feel like that's the heart of Jupiter in Cancer. It's like an invitation to find a part of our psyche that is a great embracing mother. Where is the breast of the goddess that nurtures all of us? And we could use that. Like, I think everyone could use that sometimes, you know?
Amen.
Yeah. Well, we'll close it there. Let's get some connections to our wonderful guests. So you can, so Whitney is Instagram, astro.arcana.astrology. Look her up, check her out, follow her.
Please.
Whitney is astroarcana.com. You can book a reading there, and you could sit down and talk about Jupiter in Cancer, and you could sit down and talk about Uranus entering Gemini and all the other fun things that are happening, or the eclipse cycle that we're in, or any of the major transits affecting your chart. Whitney is amazing. So grab a reading with her and check out everything else that she's up to on Instagram. Alexandra is 9livesastrology.com. You can book a reading with her. And Alexandra's got a YouTube channel that's cooking now too. I want to make sure I mention that, but I don't have it written down. Can you remind me?
It's 9 Lives Astrology. Would you believe?
It is 9 Lives Astrology. And then on Instagram, Wody Doty. It's 9 Lives
Also,
Astrology.
9 Lives Astrology. I'm doing a Saturn and Aries webinar on June 2nd with my friend Sarah Posh. If anyone wants to come talk about Saturn, and we are talking specifically about natal astrology and like how it's going to play out for you, not so much about the collective. So if you want strategies or attunement or connection with Saturn from 2 Saturn ruled ladies, we'll be there for you.
I am so excited to turn people on to what you guys are doing. And I also want to mention that this coming Sunday, we are hosting a Saturn Neptune panel talk on my YouTube channel. It's going to be a live stream, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern. I guess it'll be 9 Pacific. We've got Samuel Reynolds, Gray Crawford, Jason Hawley, Jen Zart, Becca Tarnas.
What a lineup.
Like
Patrick
the A
Watson.
list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Patrick Watson. Who else? Lisa Scheim she's hoping to come, and Rebecca Gordon. So those people all came together, if you don't know this, in 2020. And I hosted a panel talk on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction right before it occurred. You look back, watch that panel talk on Saturn, Pluto. You will be
I don't
blown
want to
away.
revisit that.
you'll be blown away to see how accurate it is in terms of what played out in the collective in the months to come. So I say that only to say you are getting a take on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries that's coming up, which is really the next major outer planetary conjunction that has taken place since Saturn and Pluto in 2020. That doesn't mean we're going to get the same results, a very different transit, but you're going to get a panel of some of the brightest astrologers in the field. I'm going to mediate and ask them, what do you think about this? You're going to get a really good show. And it'll obviously be available on the YouTube channel. If you can't make it live, you can watch the replay. But we're going to be live on Sunday at noon Eastern. So I hope to see some of you there. Make sure you check out Whitney and Alexandra's work. We will be back together again next month previewing July's astrology that includes Uranus into Gemini. So it's just the outer planetary action continues.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
And by that time, we'll see how all of this sports astrology bias plays out. It'll be fun to reflect on. Yeah. And don't forget, we have the Solstice Gathering. If you're in Minneapolis, come hang out with us. Love to see you. Okay, after I sign off, there's going to be an informational video about the Year 1 program. Stick around to hear more about it. Hope to see some of you in classes soon. We'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is our first-year course in Hellenistic astrology that begins at the end of June. June 22nd is our starting date. I'm going to take you over to the course page to tell you more about the program and what you will learn while you are in it. So here we go over to the Nightlight Astrology website. You can find this at nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses tab, go to the first year course. Now, this program is ideal for people who maybe have a little bit of background already in astrology. Maybe you've done some studying on your own independently, taken some courses or webinars and workshops, but you're looking to deepen your understanding of astrology. And maybe Hellenistic astrology in particular has been calling to you. I'll tell you more about what Hellenistic astrology is in a minute, but on the first year course page, you're going to find everything that the course includes. I want to make the structure of the course clear first. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons that I think anyone might have for studying astrology. And you can see if you check any of those boxes. First of all, there are 30 classes on the year. It's just a little under a year-long program with 30 webinars. Every webinar is 2 to 3 hours long, including a lively Q&A and conversational section after we finished our lesson for the day. Each of those lessons I lead personally through live webinars, so you can attend those live. If you want to follow along at your own pace in your own time, on your own schedule, you can always look at the recordings and take those in. And I'm going to show you what the class page looks like so you can see how you can interact with the course as uniquely and creatively as you want to. But you can either attend the live webinars or listen to the recordings or audio or video. In between major units of study within those 30 classes, we have separate classes outside of the 30 classes that are essentially tutoring sessions led by our staff, our course directors. We have 3 of them for our first year program, 3 tutors that help me guide every single class you're in and lead study sessions, and are also staffing an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions, look at charts, practice what you're learning with all of your classmates and with tutors there to help you. They'll always answer questions within a business day. So it's a really well-staffed, well-structured program. In between those major units of study and the breakout sessions, we also have guest speakers that come in throughout the year that you get free access to. The recordings are archived for you in your class folders. So you're getting people within our curriculum. And you're also getting to visit with some astrologers who are outside of the Nightlight School, but we really admire their work, and so we bring them in. You also have a ton of bonus material with every lesson. We have recommended quizzes, study guides, optional reading. And that allows people who are really, really, intense, deep, like studious types to go as far as you want to with the material, while other people who are maybe, content to take things in at, just kind of taking in the classes, that's there for you too. So you can kind of go as deeply as you want to. The class, as the year goes on, goes through major units of study in ancient Hellenistic astrology. So if you're not familiar with ancient Hellenistic astrology, this is the earliest form of horoscopic astrology. This is where the astrology that you've probably learned today comes from originally. And that makes some of its features unique. Like, for example, ancient astrologers utilized whole sign houses. We study why they used whole sign houses, how they used them, and we study uh, uh, the why behind really everything: houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, essential and accidental dignities, delineation approaches. How do you read and predict within a natal chart? All of those theoretical areas of astrology, we not only learn how to do, but we learn the why behind it. And this is what I think people find most empowering about the course, is that ancient astrology really helps to give you the rationale for everything so that you have the insight available to go off script. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're learning about a sign, Aries or Taurus or a Gemini, something like that. Ancient astrology won't just give you a list of the adjectives or keywords or descriptions of, say, a sign or a planet. It will give you an underlying philosophical explanation that then allows you to extrapolate from it the kinds of lists that you read in textbooks, which means you'll have an understanding of why everything on a list in a textbook is there in the first place. And you'll also have the insight and creativity available to add things to the list that are a part of your own unique intuition and contribution to astrology. And this is what ancient astrologers wanted students of astrology to learn: the why behind everything. So this is a class where, even though you're seeing things like planet signs, houses, dignities, aspects, and you're like, oh, I've already learned about those things. Not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology. I don't mean to sound condescending, but like, truly, most people's experience coming through this program is, wow, I had no idea all that I didn't know about the roots of everything that I've understood thus far about astrology. So it really is about digging into the philosophical core of why we do everything. And then you have greater intuitive and creative capacity as an astrological craftsman or craftswoman. So anyway, that's a brief explanation of why I think Hellenistic astrology is important. Not to mention that ancient astrology was really focused on our ability to accurately describe and predict things in the realm of karma, fate, and destiny, whereas modern astrology's hallmark and strength is psychological depth. And so when you put the two together in our program, which is why it's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, I think you have something really special. So on that note, you can see everything that we cover here. So there's a video with some of our alumni you can watch. Everything is there on the page. Now, there are 5 reasons that I want to touch on briefly before I tell you about your payment options and need-based tuition. These are 5 reasons to study astrology that if you mark any of these boxes, especially if you mark several of them, then I think it's a good indication that you might be ideal for this program, might be an ideal fit. So the first one is, if you find that astrology has become a part of your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly spiritual practice, it is a part of how you lead an inner life, then there is nothing more empowering than deepening your connection to that language, because that puts you more in the driver's seat. It's always good to have astrologers that you rely on, teachers that you listen to, get a little objective perspective, especially when you're looking at your own chart through a reading. But there's really nothing more empowering than learning to speak the language at a deeper level for yourself. And if that calls to you, if you want to understand things and be able to speak more confidently and clearly about this sacred language that you love, and this is a great reason to take a structured program. Number 2 is that you feel called to read charts for people. And look, not everyone who takes our programs is on a professional track, but we have 4 years worth of professional training programs at Nightlight that will prepare you to read professionally for others if that's the path that you're on. Maybe you don't even know if you're on that path. That's fine too. Many people take our programs just for the sake of their own personal enrichment, and again, to be kind of more in the driver's seat with respect to your astrological journey. You have more of an understanding. You can be more confident in reading symbols and experiencing transits with your own understanding that you've cultivated. But sometimes people want to read for other people. This will definitely set you up to do that. We have a certification track where you can take exams at the end of every year. They're optional. You don't have to if you're not on that level of interest. Number 3, you have done a lot of self-study. You've heard things from here and there, but you're looking to bring it all together. It is overwhelming to study astrology on your own. So if you want organization, structure, and coherence, what you're getting in this program is going on 15 years of training astrologers, 15 years of developing curriculum that has in mind the overwhelm that many people experience. And this program is structured year 1, year 2, year 3, however far you want to go with our curriculum, to give you an organized, structured, coherent way of understanding the history and language of astrology from both ancient times to modern times in all of the vastness that the field includes. And also, as we go, we want to give you the confidence that you are a part now of an astrological lineage. Astrology has always been practitioner-based. Coming through Nightlight, you are going to have the opportunity to feel aligned with a lineage. If you like my work, if you feel aligned with the way I speak the language, then this might be a good reason to come study with us. Now, if you're seeking the why behind things, if you're like, yeah, that's interesting, I get it, I understand, but why? Why signs? What's the difference between a sign and a house? Why do they ever come up with a sign and a house? What's the distinction philosophically? Why does Mars represent this? Why does Mars in this sign represent that? If you are someone who feels empowered by understanding the why behind things, you are going to love this program, because that's how I am as a teacher. That's how I am as a person. And that's what this program is really all about. Number 5, you are looking for astrological community. Look, I think Nightlight is unique in terms of the kind of warmth, acceptance, safety, and inclusiveness that our community includes intellectually, spiritually. We are really pride ourselves on being a peaceful kind of family. I'm a Cancer, right? So it's kind of a family-oriented environment. So anyway, I will end it there. If you check any of those boxes, you may want to consider studying with us. Now, I'm going to take you over to 2 things. I want to show you the dashboard. So here is the Thinkific page. You're going to join this. And on your dashboard, you're going to find any courses that you've enrolled in at Nightlight. And there are many, so you may end up in being involved in multiple courses. And you'll find that they're all there on your dashboard. Click on one of them and it will take you in. You're going to find that on the left-hand side, there's orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar, all the technical stuff you need to know when you join the course. And then you're going to find that when you go through the lessons, that the lesson includes the video, the audio, the slides, the transcripts, the Q&A box text if you couldn't make it live and see what people were talking about, flashcards, homework, a bonus PDF with all sorts of additional recommended reading, bonus videos, additional video links for bonus material. So every single time that you want to visit something within the course, everything is nicely organized. So you can see here, I'm going to pause this before it starts going, but you can embed the video right there. It's embedded and you can watch it. And then if you wanted to, you could also, right here, you could also download the video and watch it on your own device. And that's same for the audio as well. And then as you go, you'll see all of the lessons are laid out. The study sessions are also recorded if you can't make those live. So everything is nicely arranged on the website for you. And that makes it a course that if you wanted to take 3 years to accomplish, you could take 3 years to accomplish. If you want to take it for the sake of getting certified, you have the full year plus an additional year to take the exam. So, 2 years total that we give people if you're on a professional track. But most people complete the program in a year. And a lot of people, over 50% of our students go on to our year 2 and then our year 3 and horary programs as well. Now, final thing I'm going to show you is right here. You're going to find here is the enrollment options at the bottom of the first year course page. Again, this is at nightlightastrology.com, and you're going to click on the first year course, go to the bottom. The early bird payment saves you several $100s off the cost of the course. That's available till May 15th. Early bird installment plan saves you on the installment plan, regular cost of the course. That's also only available until May 15th. And then need-based tuition. All of our programs include a need-based option where we give you a sliding scale and we say, you pick your monthly tuition number within this sliding scale, which is greatly reduced off the normal tuition price. That is for people who are on a fixed or limited income, receiving disabilities, single mom, whatever the case might be. We want to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying astrology. So you don't have to feel any shame. If that is you, if you need help, if you want to take this, but you need to make it work within a tight budget, we get it. Times are tough right now. We don't think people should be priced out of studying a sacred subject like astrology. So we've been offering need-based pricing for 15 years. Nightlight is a donation-based school. It started that way. We have a sliding scale, so it's kind of like donation. You get to choose your rate anyhow. So if that's something that will help you, please use it. Thank you for listening to this. I hope it gave you a really deep and comprehensive introduction to what the course is all about and why you might find it exciting to come study with us starting at the end of June. So any questions you have about the program as you're visiting the course, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. We'll be glad to talk about anything that you have questions about, we are here, and we have a wonderful staff of people at Nightlight who will be a part of your learning experience and are all glad to help you. All right, that's it. We'll see you again later. Bye.